Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching or listening to this. And welcome to this week's episode of the Non-Identity Podcast. Now, this week we're joined by a life coach who helps support young people who are children of parents who are facing alcohol addiction. It's Tammy Vincent. Hi, Tammy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Lee. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Before we get into your life coaching, can you just explain to people who you are and where you grew up?
So I grew up in New Jersey. I now have three grown children now and live down in sunny Florida, down by the space station where they shoot off the rocket ships. And I was down in New Jersey most of my life, but I also lived in like 15 other places bouncing around. But of my 55 years, I've spent about 20 of them in the Northeast. So I'm a Northeasterner. Um, yeah, grew up what I thought was a normal childhood, and come to find out it was not. So my parents were back then, what I thought was an affluent, normal family. My mother was a child psychiatrist. My dad was a high-end stockbroker in Wall Street. So did all kinds of family things that I thought we should be doing. And come to find out, my mom was also a very raging alcoholic. My father was an alcoholic as well. My mother was what I would consider more of the less functioning alcoholic. People always go, "Oh, well, my father was a functioning alcoholic, so nothing bad happened." My mother was just the opposite, completely abusive, embarrassing, you know, drunk at family parties, drunk at school functions, embarrassing me, pulling me out of grocery stores. I just by my hair, that kind of thing. So it was kind of crazy, actually. I at 16, my dad had gotten remarried, thought it was a good idea to send me to live with my mother. And she was really at that point really badly into drugs and just everything she could do. She was dating, quote unquote, dating her drug addicts, and at one point thought it was okay to actually let me pay her debts for her with her drug addicts and dealers and all of that stuff. So yeah, it was kind of rough. And then it wasn't until I went to go have my first child that I was like, oh my gosh, I am completely and totally jacked up, like really jacked up. And that's when I really realized the damage that was done.
Did you ever get to the root problem with your parents? Because a lot of times people get addicted to things because they're running away from something. It's to mask or hide the pain of something deeper. Was there ever a reason behind your parents' alcoholism and drug addictions?
I know my dad had been sexually abused when he was a child, and I think that had a lot to do with it. He was raised by a single mom, but he was raised with aunts and uncles and everything. But I think it was the aunts and uncles or the uncles that were doing the abuse to him himself. So he grew up on one without a father figure. And then I think my mom, she was messed up from day one. She was anorexic when she was 13. She was drinking from the time she was 14 years old. Her father was also a psychiatrist. So his idea by fixing her, as he thought it for some reason, it was a good idea to send her to boarding school in England for 4 years and not see her. So she just never got the help she needed. So I don't even know. I mean, back then they didn't really diagnose. It was either it was just alcoholism. Now I'm quite certain if she was diagnosed, she would have been at the very minimum bipolar, but probably suffering all kinds of other mental illnesses for sure.
Exactly. And because you had that around you, was you ever tempted to follow down that route? Did you see drink as a way to escape things?
Yeah, I truly believe that people just have an addicted personality. I think you have a tendency towards addiction because if it wasn't drugs and alcohol, and I never got into the drugs, but I did go through periods where I was drinking way too much. And, they say it's not a problem until it starts being a problem. And there were times, like I thought I had it under control, like, oh, I'll never drink by myself. I'll never do this. I'll never do that. But, you tend to find yourself falling into the same traps of just, my college years or even my high school years, really. I tell people I did most of my partying before I got out of high school. So when I went to college, there wasn't much left, but it was just toxic. I knew, I'd wake up every morning and go, "Oh my gosh, what did I do?" Embarrassed. And that's no way to live. But I did not ever go into the drugs. I think I tried coke one time, and I did the cocaine that was supposed to be for the whole party, and I thought that was a really bad idea because they were like, "That was for everyone, not just for you," and I was like, "Oh my gosh," and it literally did nothing to me. So I decided that drugs weren't my thing because I couldn't afford it. So never did that again. And then I just think it's a personality. So when I decided, okay, that's going to be a problem, then I threw myself into work. And in college, I worked 3 jobs and went to school full time. So and then when I stopped doing that, people said, Tammy, slow down, you're going to kill yourself. Well, then I decided it was a good idea to hit the casinos. And everything I did, I just did in excess. So I spent a lot of time in 12-step programs just trying to figure out how to break any drive to do everything to the fullest.
No, I totally agree with you because it seems like, in a way, we've lived with a teenage life. So between the age of 15 and 22, I was a party animal. I was out 5 or 6 times a week, but I didn't see it as a problem until looking back now because I was enjoying it. And like you said, it was you tell yourself like I'm not going to drink alone, but then you'd find a reason to go out. Oh, I've had a good day at work, so it's time to go out on my friend's birthday, or we've just passed an exam, it's time to go out. So, but also I feel like now I've knocked that on the head, I've replaced that with food. So I think,
Mm.
like you said, people with the addictive personality, you're always finding something to replace. So you think you've controlled one thing, and then something else comes into play.
Ultimately, like you said, you're just trying to fill a void. You're trying to fill a void of whatever you needed that you never got, and you're going to fill it with something. So I always say, when you pick up, so if you pick, my sister has struggled with food addiction since she went into recovery. So, and I just actually had someone on my podcast about food addiction, and it is because it's like that dopamine hit, and you're going to get it no matter where you can get it. You're going to find something until you actually undo all of that need to fill that void. And that's a lot of work. A lot of work.
You know, I totally agree because like I use takeout food as an excuse. Again, if I've had a bad day at work, I get a takeaway to feel better. If I've had a good day at work, I celebrate with a takeaway. And I'm
Yep.
just starting to notice that it's sort of following the same cycle as I did using the alcohol in my teen times. So I totally agree with what you're saying. What was the light bulb moment for you where you realised, right, I need to change this around and enter these programs?
I think there was 2 moments. One was when I was 16 and was actually at a suicidal moment. And then I realized, okay, I've got to get out of the situation I'm in. I was living with my mother, who was very, I mean, just over the top into drugs and everything. And I realized it was becoming unsafe. And I had that suicidal moment, and I thought, enough is enough. And so then I moved back to my dad, asked him to let me move back in. And, then I went through what I thought was like back to normal, get out of my house, get out of that environment, and really start to work on me. But it wasn't until about 8 years later or 10 years later that I was having my first child. And I realized that I didn't even understand what unconditional love felt like.
Yeah.
So I panicked, freaked out, had like a total mental breakdown because I didn't know if I was going to be able to love my child because I had never felt love like that. And I realized, okay, if I don't even understand what unconditional love is, or can't even conjure up a picture of wrapping my arms around somebody that I truly enjoy wrapping my arms around, how am I going to raise this kid? How am I, what else don't I know? And what other damage was done in these 16, 18 years of just chaos? So that's when I really started on, therapy and doing anything I could do to learn about everything that had gone on.
It's crazy how children change things because, again, I attribute the birth of my son to the reason why I stopped drinking because he was either buy beer or buy nappies. So it's mad how a child comes into the world, it totally changes your perspective of life.
All of a sudden realize that now somebody else is responsible. Your actions are going to have an effect on somebody else. When you don't care about yourself, your actions don't phase you. You don't care if you do damage to yourself, honestly. But then all of a sudden you got another little person to take care of, and it's a slap in the face. It's a wake up call for sure.
No, 100%. So you moved in, you went to therapies and these programs. Over in England, you hear a lot about the 12-step program. What is it? Can you explain how that helped you?
It's the 12 steps, I'll just use AA for example,
Yeah,
is just it's a program and it's based on spirituality and having a higher power. And it's really just surrendering. And then it kind of guides you through these 12 different steps of how you can heal and how you can, stay sober or deal with the pain of having been with someone. A lot of the programs that went to were actually like Al-Anon, which was for people that grew up with alcoholics. So before I kind of more dabbled in the 12 steps for myself, whereas the ones that I really took seriously were the ones for healing for growing up with that alcoholic. So like now that's what I coach, but you know, you there's a lot of things you have to do, and one of the biggest things is just surrender and just be like I'm powerless. I need help. And that's, whether you do it through a higher power, through God, through, Allah, Buddha, whatever you do it through, that's one of the biggest steps is just accepting the fact that you're out of control, that you can't do it yourself. um but then you kind of, there's a lot of like there's a big portion of it that's about forgiveness, and that's why I kind of bounced in and out. I mean, I've always reverted back to Al-Anon. I have my little daily readers, I have my ACOA, which is adult children of alcoholics. I have those books and everything, but I bounce in and out of different programs and have always just taken like the big picture of the 12-step program and then used other modalities to kind of fill it in. That's just kind of what's worked for me because I'll just be honest, I get to a point like in the 12 steps where you get to forgiveness. And until you can move on and heal, you're supposed to forgive everything that was done and just, let it go, like let it go, let bygones be bygones. And I have a different theory on forgiveness. So I think that when my version of forgiveness was letting go of the anger and the resentment and the pain and the hurt, and being able to look at my mother and say, she's sick, she had a problem, she didn't mean to do this to me. But would I ever in a million years say I 100% forgive her? No, absolutely not. The stuff that she did was unforgivable to me. So, like I see so many people like in that step of the program get stuck there for years. And I'm like, don't do that to yourself. I think part of the program is also working with your higher power to find grace and be able to give yourself grace. So, it's kind of like everything. You have to, I mean, one of the biggest slogans in the 12-step programs is take what you like and leave the rest. So maybe I gave myself a little bit personal freedom with that theory, but yeah, it's one of the most productive 12-step programs. They have them for everything. They have them for gambling and addiction, sex addiction and food addiction, and they have literally a 12-step program for everything. My thing behind the 12-step programs is why, like Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. It's all these anonymous programs. And I'm like, why not just take these big concepts and pour them into people without the guilt and the shame, without the anonymous part of it. That's my goal, I guess, is to spread the word of, you know, there's healing, there's help. Yes, you have to surrender and you need help, but don't be ashamed of it. Just go get it. You deserve it. That's my message.
not exactly. Yeah, it's turning the negative to a positive because I think we see needing help and support as a negative situation. But like you said, if you just go and get it, you deserve that help because you deserve to feel better about yourself and feel happy and come to terms with situations that happens to you in your life. So I think that's a real good message. You decided to move into life coaching others. What made you take that decision, and then what did you do about setting that up?
So I got into coaching because I was one of those chronic learners. So if you were going to hypnotize me to help me with a mindset block, let's say, and try to convince, go back in my childhood, I had to learn everything about it first. So I literally like someone said, "Oh, you should do some inner child work." And I said, "Oh, that sounds interesting. What's inner child work?" So I literally, while I was going through the process, would go back and go so deep into learning about inner child work, not even so much doing the steps at first, but just understanding why I was doing what I was doing. that I ended up with all these certifications and all this stuff. And I had a life coaching certification way back because I had a psychology degree. But while I was in my healing journey, I was like, "Oh, this looks good. A life coach. That sounds fun." Um, so I got all these things, and then it finally was like at first, 25 years ago, I could never have been a life coach when I learned about life coaching because I wasn't far enough along in my journey. It would have just been my own healing process, and I feel like I would have been using my clients to help me heal, which obviously, as a coach, when you're helping someone else heal, you're always doing your own healing in the process. But I didn't want it to be about me. Like I wrote books 25 years later because I didn't want the book to be my graphic, gory, disgusting details. I just wanted it to be a reference to help other people. So that's kind of where I got after these 25, 30 years. I started noticing, hey, everybody and their mother is coming to me, people that I meet on the streets, people I see at church, wherever, they're coming to me to get coached. And that's great, and I love it, and then I was just for years just called myself a mentor and a friend, but then I was like, "Okay, now it's time to actually make business out of it," because I lost my business during COVID, and I thought, "Now it's time to do something I love." And if you're thinking about doing something you love, what helps me more than helping people speed up that 30-year journey of healing? So, some of the stuff I've been practicing for 30 years, you can literally 30 minutes and I can show you how to fix it something. And so that's kind of how it got started.
And going back, so to something you said earlier, you didn't realise you was about 16 that your childhood weren't normal. How would an adult now recognise that maybe their childhood was a bit unconventional? I know there's a lot of media to let you know what society will say was right or wrong, but how deep down do you know if you need help or support?
There's a lot of questions you can ask yourself, but usually children that grow up in that environment, I mean, I knew it wasn't normal, but I don't think I understood the complete dysfunction of how abnormal it was. I mean, people get spanked, but yeah, people shouldn't be locked in closets for days at a time. I mean, there's definitely some fine lines. And also, a lot of the people that grew up with alcoholics don't even know they did until they get out of the house. And then they look back. But a lot of the things are like, um, so growing up with an alcoholic or a drug addict or any kind of major dysfunction, it's basically what's happening is you have an unavailable parent. You have an emotionally unavailable parent. And because of that, you lack a lot of things. You don't get a lot of the love and the attention and the boundaries that you need. So you develop all these coping skills. So, like I grew up thinking as long as I was perfect, everything would be okay. I wouldn't get beat, I wouldn't get spanked, I wouldn't get locked in closets as long as I was the perfect little girl. So I grow up as an adult and now all of a sudden I'm so hard on myself. I strive for perfectionism, which is a myth by the way. Um and you just grow up with these coping skills and then all of a sudden you're like, "Man, why can't I have a good relationship?" Well, if you go back, it's because you never were modeled a good relationship, and then all of a sudden it's like, why do I say yes to everything? Even though I don't want to do something, why do I say yes? Why am I such a big pushover? And that's probably one of the biggest things, not being able to stand up for yourself. And it's because you were never allowed to have a voice. You were never allowed to show emotions. You're always told to, shut up. Why are you so happy? Nobody's that happy. Zip it. And you were just always squashed down. So when you become an adult, you feel squashed down. So, those are the things like I tell people if you feel like you can't stand up for yourself or have your own voice, though, that's a big trigger. If you are constantly attaching yourself to people with drinking problems or, narcissists or just people with other kinds of mental illnesses or disorders, it's because that's what you understand. That's what you know how to deal with. So you gravitate towards it. I mean, there's a lot more science behind why you do that, but that's the general thing, is your brain would rather be comfortable than uncomfortable. It would rather be familiar than comfortable, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you grow up and all of a sudden you're married to an alcoholic, you know how to deal with him because you dealt with your father or your mother. So you know what to do. So, but because your brain is going, oh, I know how to deal with this, you'd rather stay there than strike out to do something more. And the other thing, and I think you already said the word of unworthy, is that when you grow up like that, you grow up thinking that what you say, what you do, and how you feel is not important. And you grow up thinking it's not worth having more. You don't believe it is. So you're 100% content to just settle. And I literally meet people that are 65 years old and they're like, well, I've never really been happy, but I've never been unhappy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's sad, but you can be happy now. I mean, it's never too late to start being happy.
How do you self care? Because obviously, like you said, you're on your own healing journey, but then you're also dealing with clients who probably trigger things that you went through, but you've got to be there for someone else.
A lot of me time, a lot of journaling, a lot of I listen to, affirmations. I'm always listening to a books on tape or, an audible or some podcast or something just to keep positive. Because yes, when you're listening, when you're talking, I was talking to a client the other day and it was literally like she lived a parallel life to mine. And I was like, wow, like it was so cool. But at the same time, it was like, huh, I wonder, like it literally brought me back. Like, I wonder if I ever dealt with that. I don't know if I did or not. So it's just a lot of self reflecting and really just practice in being who you want to be because you will catch yourself, no matter how far in the journey you are, you're going to catch yourself reverting back to those old things and always, having, I say that little, that inner critic, having that inner critic that's yapping at you from behind, telling you this, that, and the other thing. And just be, I guess when I stopped beating myself up and started looking at things with curiosity instead of judgment towards myself, um, things got a lot better. That was a lot of my self-care is just giving myself some grace for everything. Nobody's perfect,
Exactly.
so
So if
but
someone needs your help and support, where can they reach out to you?
probably the best thing is just to go to my website and reach out through there. It's just tammyvincent.com. That's the easiest place. You can pretty much reach out to there and we can just chat. I have a place where you can book a coffee chat or book I call it a confidence catalyst call. So for people that want a little more confidence, it's 30-minute free call and we just chat and then we can see which direction. Because I do have courses and I have a group coaching course. I guess it's like a 8-week course going into a group coaching. I have different things, but sometimes people just want to talk.
And also, you said earlier you podcast. What's your podcast and what's it about?
It's called The Adult Child of Dysfunction. So it's the subtitles Thriving After Chaos. And it's really just stories of hope and healing. So I've had people on there who, had such traumatic trauma that they lost 13 years of their lives in an amnesia state where they literally don't remember anything for 13 years, wrote books and everything. And then I've had a girl on there who got to interview her mother's 14 different personalities.
Oh wow.
So it's very, it's just anybody because chaos is all over the place. Dysfunction is all over the place. And in these days, it's at levels you would never even imagine. Like everybody's going through some kind of dysfunction. And you don't need this, what they call a big T trauma to carry it into adulthood. It could be something very small. So it could be being bullied in the first grade. I mean, it doesn't even matter. And that's not small. I didn't make light of that. But you don't have to be beaten and physically and sexually abused your whole life to carry stuff into adulthood. So it's just a hope and healing podcast, really, of stories and how people got on the other side.
And did you set that up to help with your healing journey? Because I set this podcast up because my wife had a stroke 3 years ago at the age of 33. So that just turned my world into chaos. And it
Oh
was a way
yeah.
of meeting, inspiring people. And I love speaking to people. I love hearing their stories. So that's the reason why I set this up. Did you set your podcast up for you or did you set it up to help other people?
I think I more set it up to help other people. Because I listen to a lot of podcasts and I feel like the ones I listen to are more for my healing journey, but this one is more so that people can get a different perspective because my chaos is different than your chaos is different than everybody else's dysfunction. So I want people to and some people may not resonate with me. They may not like the fact that I say the word shit. I mean, that used to be my favorite word. So, you know what I'm saying? So, and I believe that everybody resonates with somebody different for a different reason. So I love that some people that resonate with me will reach out to me, or they might hear somebody else on there and they're like, wow, I really like that girl. I'm going to go do yoga with her, whatever it is. But I just figure the more we can get the word out and the more stories of hope and healing there are in the world, the better place the world's going to be.
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. Your own coaching business and obviously podcasting. Now, what struggles have you found?
Honestly, marketing and just technology. Like, I don't have problems when I can get someone that comes to me. We have no problem working together forever, but it's getting people. I'm not my superpower is not technology, it is not marketing. And, just getting started, you don't have a lot of money to throw that and delegate. Everybody's like, well, just delegate it. And I'm like, yeah, I need to keep some of this in my pocket for a minute and pay some bills. I did lose my business in COVID. So, but that's really it. It's just finding the people. And I know they're out there. I mean, I know they're out there. It's just a matter of finding. I want to start speaking on stages. So um that's my next goal to tackle. And again, everybody says, "Oh, just pay someone, pay one of these big companies, give them $5,000, they'll give you a TEDx talk." And I'm like, I don't want to do that. So just really networking, and that I know it just takes time and it's baby steps, but I'm just a little impatient. There's a lot of people that I feel like I could work with, but
No, exactly. Um, so what we're doing to make sure people can get to you quicker, we'll chuck all the links to your website and podcast and stuff in the description. We're coming to the end of the interview, but I've got one last question, and this is a question I ask every guest. Now, your answer to yourself won't change your life's journey so far, but if you had 30 seconds with your 13-year-old self, what would you say?
that it's not your fault, that everything that happened to you, you had nothing to do with it. No matter how many people told you that you did not have anything to do with it. And that you are 100% worthy to go get help and to get the love that you never got. You were born an authentic, beautiful, pure, joyous person. And then shit happened and you got beat but down. But everything that you ever need to have pure happiness is right inside of you. You just have to find someone that has the tools to help you access it.
Well, Tammy, that's brilliant. And thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, Lee.